had the massive rally, as I talked about in the last video. And of course, I'm sure you're aware of it. There it is. So that's the big, massive rally we saw in the last few days. And there it is. It's gone now above the 55 EMA, that purple line on my chart. Now, here's an interesting situation here I want to bring to your attention. So if we just focus on that chart there, you will notice that Bitcoin went into its RSI overbought zone right there. So when Bitcoin had this massive, incredible rally here, it became overbought on the RSI. The setting here on the RSI is setting of 2 and 95.5, setting of 2, 95.5 on the overbought, oversold levels. And I find this to be very helpful and very useful, as I'll explain to you in just a few moments. Now, also you will notice apart from the overbought zone on the RSI, on my other indicator here, which is the Sigma chart, that's the indicator I created some years ago. It's one of our own indicators called LT Sigma. Now, obviously, I don't have time to go into the exact meaning and the interpretation of the Sigma chart here and what the different colors mean. But just to put it very simply, what this indicator does, it shows to you the extremely overbought and extremely oversold levels on the market, okay? And the way I use this, and by the way, just to let you know that Sigma is a mathematical computation. It's an actual mathematical term. And again, I'll do another video on this separately. I don't have time for it right now. But it's a very useful and a very powerful indicator when used. Now, what essentially is happening here is that Bitcoin, on the day it had the massive rally, as you'll see right there. Let me turn this to a blue arrow, as you can see there. So notice that Bitcoin entered into the extremely overbought red zone, and that red zone essentially in mathematical terms and according to the laws of probability has become extremely overbought, or indeed extended, overextended. In other words, there's only one problem here, in that normally when price enters the extremely overbought, extremely oversold levels, for example, on the Sigma, we usually see a strong bounce. For example, you will see here that Bitcoin dropped into its extremely oversold, or indeed overextended zone, and immediately was followed by a bounce higher, as you can see there. Normally what happens is when price gets into the extremely overbought levels here, we usually see a pullback. Usually there's a pullback, not necessarily a deep pullback, but a pullback to the blue zone, to the safe zone, okay? In other words, a pullback to the averages, to the mean, all right? Of course, that has not happened. Now, you'll see also the same thing with the RSI. So as I just showed you, price goes into the extremely overbought RSI, again, the setting of 2, and notice that price has not reacted. Usually in a situation like this, price goes into the RSI overbought, and normally this is followed by a pullback. Again, by a pullback, I'm just talking about a reversion back to the mean, a reversion back to the averages, like the 8 to the 21 moving averages. It has not done that. In fact, if anything, what the price of Bitcoin has done is to ignore its overbought signals, both on the RSI and also on the Sigma. So just to give you an example of what I'm talking about here is notice that some months ago when Bitcoin went to its extremely overbought RSI, notice that it quickly was followed by a pullback. Bitcoin again became extremely overbought on the RSI, and notice it was quickly followed by a drop or indeed a pullback. The fact is, it has not done that on this occasion. And by the way, there have been other occasions, for example, when Bitcoin has ignored its RSI and indeed its Sigma oversold, overbought levels. What does it mean though? So the question is, what does it mean when Bitcoin, or indeed when the price ignores its overbought levels or oversold levels? Okay. Now, an amateur investor would say, well, it probably means that the indicator is not working. No, that is not the right answer. That is an incorrect answer. No, it's giving you information. Think about it, guys. Let me ask you this question. If Bitcoin goes into its RSI overbought levels, as we can see it's happened there, and it's not quickly followed by a pullback, and again, same thing with the Sigma, became extremely overbought, but has not pulled back. What is that telling you? It's giving you a massive piece of information, is it not? Just have a think about that. The information it's giving you is that, number one, the momentum on this move is not done yet. In other words, there is probably more momentum behind this upward move. Because here's the thing, if it was going to have a pullback, it should have done this by now. You know, price usually becomes overbought on the RSI and also on the Sigma. And usually it's quickly or indeed immediately followed by some kind of pullback, a reversion back to the mean, okay, back to the averages. It has not done that. In fact, if anything, it's ignored the overbought signals. And what this is telling us is that there's still more momentum. In colloquial terms, it means there's probably more juice behind this move, more energy. All right, guys. So that's what I think is happening here. The fact that price is ignoring the overbought signals on the RSI and also on the Sigma, that tells me, in fact, there's positive news for Bitcoin traders. The good news is that there's probably more momentum behind this upward move, and we're not done yet on this move. In other words, on the balance of probabilities, here's what I think is likely. I would give this right now about a 30 to 40% probability of a pullback. So again, a lower probability. So I think the probability of a pullback right now is about, so a pullback to the averages on the balance of probability is about 30 to 40%. Not very high. But on the balance of probabilities, the more likely move, the higher probability move, is that we're going to see, again, I'm talking about 70 to 65%, is that we're going to probably see a move, a grind higher to test the 100 EMA. And that's the orange line on my chart there. Okay. And again, remember, the job of a professional trader, investor, or analyst is indeed to assess the probabilities, not certainties. There are no certainties. And of course, not possibilities. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about in between. The in-between possibility and in-between certainty, there is the probability. By the way, some people have asked me on social media, is it possible that this particular move on Bitcoin is nothing more than a bull trap? In other words, is it possible that in fact this move is not really the reversal or an uptrend, but actually is just a bull trap that is just going to end up in disaster? It's going to continue falling back down again.